This episode is brought to you by Pine Melon. This holiday season, let Pine Melon make your Christmas prep simple and stress-free. From fresh local ingredients to holiday staples like lamb racks and ham, they have everything you need to create a memorable feast. Avoid the holiday rush and enjoy the convenience of grocery delivery right to your door. Use code CityCastDenver to get $35 off your first order of $75 or more. Support local farmers and makers while making your holidays brighter with Pine Melon. Just go to pinemelon.com to make your grocery order today. That's pinemelon.com. Today on CityCast Denver, Governor Polis recently unveiled a big new transportation plan laying out his vision for how we will get around this state over the next decade. From expanding bus, light rail, and train service to potentially building more than 3,000 new miles of bike lanes, he's got some lofty ideas for addressing climate change from a transit perspective. Matt Fromer is a transportation and land use policy wonk who has worked with the governor's office on these issues, and he joins me to talk about what this new plan could mean for Denverites. Today is Monday, December 9th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Matt Fromer, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Thank you.
So let's talk about, Governor Polis just unveiled this big transit plan in the last couple of weeks. Can you give me the big picture of what he presented?
Right. So a couple weeks ago, Governor Polis released a transportation vision for 2035, 10 years away. And the real gist, it's about expanding transportation options for Coloradans beyond just driving. And so what he did was took a look at the share of trips that are currently transit, biking, and walking, the share of all trips. It's about 10% of total trips. The rest are in a car, and most of those are people driving alone. And what the vision says is over the next 10 years, we should shift from 10% of total trips that are transit, biking, and walking to 20% of total trips. And do so by really investing in our transit system, getting those buses and trains coming more frequently every 10, 15 minutes instead of 30 minutes or an hour, building out our rail system that we've been designing forever, building more safe and protected bike lanes that are connected and don't leave you hanging in the middle of the city, and same with sidewalks. And then the big one, too, is on the land use side. So as we grow, expecting to add up to 2 million people by 2050 to our state. And how we grow is really important. Where we allow housing to be built, what that housing looks like, what those communities look like is really important. So tying all those things together is really what the transportation vision is about. I'd say one thing it does really well is list out the potential benefits. So part of what drove this is the cost of living in Colorado, which is a top concern for most people here, right?
Thing we hear about the most, honestly.
Right, yeah. Housing, the biggest cost. Transportation's number 2, the second highest household expense. And that's because driving's really expensive. Car ownership's expensive. You look at a new car, and once you tally up purchase price, fuel, maintenance, repairs, insurance, parking, it's about $1,000 a month, and most households have 2. So really expensive. And then you compare that to the price of, let's say, a monthly RTD pass. Talking $88, unlimited rides, $27 if you're a senior. Compared to the price of biking, even an e-bike, it's just much more affordable to use these other options. So, I don't think we can expect people to trade in their cars and become zero-car households. I think that would be a stretch for most people in Colorado just because of the way we've built our communities. But surely there are opportunities to go from a 3-car household to a 2-car household to 1, and supplement some of those trips with the bus, the train, biking, walking, once those options become better, more convenient, safer, affordable.
Reliable.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, let's talk about cars in one aspect before we move on to these other thoughts. And Polis really has already got one big win in this department because we got a press release last week from his office saying that Governor Polis announces that Colorado has become number 1 in the nation in market share for new electric vehicles. Can you explain what that means and how did he do that?
So yes, Colorado is now number 1 for electric vehicle sales. We leapfrogged California, which I never saw coming. And what that means is if you look at the total share of cars sold right now that are electric, it's about 1 in 4. right? 25% of new cars are
That's
electric.
a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. And it's probably even higher in cities like Denver and in Boulder, where there's more interest in electric vehicles and we have better charging infrastructure.
I was going to say the infrastructure is there to begin with, because you can't just plug in an electric car to a regular old outlet.
Right. And yeah, it's really impressive. I think it's a testament to the impact of the climate policies and programs the Polis administration has rolled out. Not just Polis administration, of course, the city of Denver has its own climate fund, and they've used that to help people install charging stations at their homes. They've got the e-bike rebate.
Extremely popular program. Sells out the minute it opens up.
Right. I was reading 1 in 40 adults in Denver have claimed an e-bike rebate.
Whoa.
And now it's being copied all over the country.
That's
hugely
amazing.
Successful.
Yeah.
And as a whole, actually, e-bikes are reducing emissions even a little bit more than electric vehicles. Incredible potential to replace car trips. So yeah, I think the electric vehicle story is really impressive and compelling here. We've got more and more chargers coming online. A lot of money from the Biden administration to build more fast chargers in public. And then the technology's gotten a lot better. But yeah, I think one thing in the transportation vision, they did some modeling that looks at our greenhouse gas reduction targets. Transportation sector is the highest polluting sector for greenhouse gas emissions, and it's also the most stubborn. It's really hard to get 6 million people.
It's hard to change it. To move the needle.
Right. Especially compared to, let's say, the electricity sector, where we've had a lot more success starting to shut down coal plants, or at least plan the coal plant shutdowns in the future. There are fewer players to work with there. You've got utilities, and they're regulated. Transportation's really hard. And so we've made a lot of progress with electric vehicles. It does take a long time to turn over the fleet, right? We only replace 5 or 6% of the cars on the road every year. Right now, of those new cars, 1 in 4 are electric. We need to ramp that up to 100% of new sales are electric, and then sustain it for decades to fully zero out emissions from transportation. And so that's really part of the reason that we need to think about other options to cut emissions and building communities and providing transportation options so people don't have to drive so much. And I would say, again, on the land use side, it's not just about replacing car trips with transit biking and walking, but if we just build stuff closer together, you may not have to drive 25 miles to work. Maybe it's just 15 miles or 10 miles. And that in itself is a huge win.
Sure.
On the emissions side, and also in terms of congestion and just system efficiency.
And building more affordably, or offering more affordable options closer. Because I think that's a huge, I have countless friends in my orbit who have moved outside of the city because they can't afford to be here anymore. They have a family now, and living in Capitol Hill is just not possible. So they're in Arvada or whatever. And so we'll talk about the density stuff in a little bit, but I want to dig into Polis really wanting to increase bus and train service. And I think a lot of Denverites are going to hear that and think, like, first of all, he's a Boulder guy. Like, he finally wants to build this Front Range rail, passenger rail he's been talking about. Is he just talking about his train idea?
I think we think about the train.
Yes.
This is a promise that RTD made to voters in 2004, a long time ago. I don't know if anyone is at RTD today who was there back then. So they inherited this project. It ended up being a lot more expensive than we initially thought. One thing we're recognizing, though, is that we need more funding for transit. And a lot of us think we probably need to eventually go back to voters and think about new ways to fund transit service so that we have more trains and buses and better infrastructure. It's really hard to do that if you haven't followed through on past promises.
I'm thinking that exact thing. I'm thinking about Denverites that have been here for a couple decades and said, A, we've seen this before. B, we've raised taxes, our own taxes, to fund this before, and we didn't get what was promised. How do we think about moving forward from that place?
Right. I think we're at a real impasse with the train to Boulder until the Biden administration came in and passed their infrastructure law in 2021 with a ton of money for passenger rail, historic levels of funding. And Colorado realized then that we could fund this Front Range passenger rail, a train that would run all the way up from Fort Collins down through Longmont, Boulder, Denver, down to Colorado Springs, Pueblo, maybe Trinidad. That intercity passenger rail And then RTD would be able to share the track for its train up to Boulder and Longmont and complete the unfinished Fast Tracks promise from 2004. So that new federal money is really unlocking this opportunity. And the Polis administration's really gone after those funds. They just pulled in a huge grant to upgrade some of the rail facilities and start to kind of make that project happen. And then looking ahead, we've got some money we pulled down from the legislature this past year from car rental fees and from oil and gas production fees that could go to new rail infrastructure to start to build out that Front Range passenger rail.
We have to talk about RTD in this context as well. Like, we know the governor tried to reform our public transit agency last year, but we also know we have a new board coming in. What do you think Polis has in store for RTD and Denver's buses and light rails and these other projects we're talking about?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about the RTD board. There's a lot of new energy coming in and a lot of big vision that we haven't necessarily had in the past. The pandemic was really tough on transit agencies, really tough.
Yes.
I mean, ridership went through the floor overnight, and then we've got this sort of new norm of travel behavior where, work from home basically tripled and it's kind of stayed there. Still, though, only about 15% of trips are commuting. Most trips are for other things, shopping, a medical appointment,
like a sports game, or
right, taking a kid to school, whatever it is. So there's a lot of opportunities to replace car trips, and transit agencies around the country are really adapting and adjusting their service networks, the design of their service networks to serve all trips, serve weekend trips, night trips. That's a big shift, right? We really designed our RTD system for suburban commuters, to sort of hub and spoke to bring people into downtown to work every day and really focus the service during peak periods. Now we're thinking about how do we serve all trips and how do we grow ridership in kind of this like new normal of transportation. And that's going to take a lot of vision. So I'm excited to work with the new board on that. I think one thing, we talked about CDOT's goals and ambition around things like climate and diversifying transportation options. Denver's got a lot of the same goals. We kind of left RTD behind a little bit in those conversations. They do not have climate goals or ridership goals or necessarily a big, bold vision to deliver the kind of service that we need in the city. We still have plenty of buses riding down heavily populated corridors, commercial corridors, coming every 60 minutes. And the service stops at 6:30 p.m. And so it's not necessarily useful for enough people here. And so if you look at cities like Seattle and what they've managed to do with their transit system there, they've built out rail. They've really doubled down on bus service. It's coming every 5, 10, 15 minutes. And they have 75% of the population living within a 10-minute walk of a 5 or 10-minute bus or train, right? That's the kind of system we need to build for people to leave their car at home and take the bus or train instead.
I think that's the question then, is if RTD is really good and going to be that partner, because I'm thinking like RTD was not present at the governor's conference announcing this plan. And I would say a lot of Denverites don't necessarily trust RTD for the things you're talking about: reliability of service, options that serve them, frequency of rides. But they have to be partners to make this work. Do you think that RTD can be trusted to show up for this big vision?
Yes, I think things are trending in the right direction. Like I mentioned, those challenges coming out of the pandemic, there were a lot of safety and security issues. There's a huge operator shortage, and they had to let go of a lot of drivers during COVID. And it was hard to bring those drivers back and retain those drivers, especially in the work environment. They've done a lot better this year. They've reduced the vacancy rate for bus drivers from 20% to 5% this year. And immediately we're seeing some of the new proposed service changes for January, where they want to bring back service on the rail lines, on some of the bus lines. And they just approved a budget this week, I think, to increase service 10% in 2025. Pretty significant, right?
Yeah.
And so they're starting to get back to where we were before the pandemic, or really what they're aiming for is about 85% of 2019 service levels. That's what they think they can do with current funding. And so trending in the right direction there. Beyond that, though, we need to think bigger. And our coalition is calling for a doubling of transit service and really building out this bus rapid transit network and this rail network so it really works for people over the next 10 years. That's going to take more investment.
Absolutely. This episode is brought to you by the Office of Climate Action. Whether something needs fixing, you need something temporarily, or you're just looking for the next unique item for your wardrobe, make the choice to reuse. It's just as good as new. Introducing Denver's Reuse Directory, where you'll find all of the Mile High's reuse businesses in one place. Need the sole of your shoe repaired? Take a peek at Denver's Reuse Directory and find a local cobbler. Have a home improvement project to tackle? Check out a tool from one of Denver's equipment rental shops. Heading to a holiday party and need a fancy outfit? Stat? Explore endless consignment and resale stores across the city. All of these resources can be found in Denver's Reuse Directory. Repair it, rent it, buy it used. It's just as good as new. Find your way to reuse and support local businesses at denvergov.org/reuse directory. That's denvergov.org/reuse directory. This episode is brought to you by CAP Management. CAP Management is a Denver-based HOA management company serving townhomes, mid-rises, and high-rises. From staffing, accounting, project management, careful reserve planning, customer service, and more, CAP serves properties that appreciate working with an engaged, proactive team with the expertise to work with the most complex properties. Many of their clients make up the skyline of our wonderful city. CAP is also the only HOA management company with a sustainability mission, dedicated to guiding HOAs and how to operate in a sustainable way, navigating ordinances like Energize Denver and Colorado's Building Performance Program. I'm just thinking about when my mom took over her HOA and got them to install those car chargers. Looking for Brooke to manage your property? Well, she's available. I'm just kidding. CAP is working to envision the future of the HOA industry, like their partnership with the University of Colorado to pilot the nation's first sustainable HOA certification framework. If your HOA is looking for help, visit capmanagement.com to learn more. That's capmanagement.com. This episode is brought to you by Pine Melon. This holiday season, let Pine Melon make your Christmas prep simple and stress-free. From fresh local ingredients to holiday staples like lamb racks and ham, they've got everything you need to create a memorable feast. Avoid the holiday rush and enjoy the convenience of grocery delivery right to your door. With over 200 local farmers, ranchers, and producers across Colorado, Pine Melon delivers high-quality meats, fresh produce, baked goods, pantry staples, and more straight to your door. Skip the crowded stores and let Pine Melon handle the hard part. No subscriptions required, just same-day delivery in a 2-hour window within Denver and Boulder. Enjoy the convenience of grocery delivery with Pine Melon. And don't forget the code CityCastDenver to get $35 off your first order of $75 or more. Just go to pinemelon.com to make your order today. That's pinemelon.com. Well, let's move on to this other topic that I know is huge, especially for our listeners, which is bike lanes, right? One of the other big goals from Polis's plan was to build 3,540 miles of bike lanes across the state. And for a reference for folks, our last mayor, Mayor Hancock, fought to build 125 miles of new bike lanes, and Denver is the biggest city in the state. How is Polis possibly going to get to this over 3,000 mile mark?
Great question. Yeah, I think the vision, was kind of high level, aspirational, did set some targets. It didn't necessarily get in the weeds as to, how we're actually going to build this. It does point out some of the progress we've made with new funding programs. I mentioned, CDOT used to just sort of be a highway builder.
Sure.
Under this administration, they've really developed new programs. There's a Safer Main Streets program. They've got Vision Zero goals. They chipped in on the Broadway bike lane in Denver, and they're really starting to look at how to make the state highways more multimodal. So we're starting to see that investment come in, new opportunities with the federal bill, like the carbon reduction program, all these new programs that aren't just about highways, widening highways, building more interchanges for cars. It's about other options. And so making some great progress recently there. And so I think building on that, I also think Denver has a huge role to play here as well. I think one thing we hear a lot in surveys is that a lot of people are interested in biking. 60% of people would bike if they felt safer, if they felt like they were protected from cars. And so we've got this incredible pent up demand. I'm sure a lot of people have a bike, in their garage somewhere in their basement.
I am one of those people.
That they wish they used more. They wish they felt safe on.
Yep.
And so I do think there's a lot of pent up demand. You know, when we get into the actual projects and building out the infrastructure, there tends to be a little bit more drama. You know, the trade-offs between protecting cyclists and preserving parking, which has really been sacred. And I think a lot of drivers really feel entitled to park wherever they want, you know, right in front of their destination and not like 10 feet further. And so we have to recognize here that as we start to prioritize other transportation modes, particularly in urban areas where we don't really want it to just be about cars, there's going to be some trade-offs here. I think the other big thing moving right here, I'll just circle back to e-bikes, is just the adoption rates for e-bikes and their use has been really impressive. And it's basically doubling the need for bicycle infrastructure and growing every day. So that demand's going to keep putting pressure on the system to provide safe ways to get around. And listen, if you look at the street grid in Denver, there's a ton of redundancy for cars to get around. A huge grid. There's a million ways to get anywhere by car.
It's a lot of options depending on what direction you're going.
Right.
Sure.
All we're asking for is just ways to get around on a bike.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just every 3 blocks, 5 blocks, a basic connected grid of safe bicycle infrastructure. It's totally possible.
Do you think the over 3,000 miles is possible? Or do you think that's a pipe dream? I don't know.
I haven't gone through and drawn it out on the map.
Yeah.
You know, there's some longer bicycle lanes. You think about like State Highway 93 connecting Golden to Boulder.
Oh, right.
There's a new Rails to Trails project that Boulder County just announced going through Erie, some of those longer routes that people can use that could really add up. But yeah, we've got a lot of kind of disconnected bike lanes right now in our cities that kind of just dump you off into traffic. I'm sure a lot of people have had that experience.
I've had it as a driver and then been not sure what to do because all of a sudden the bike lane changes and I'm worried I'm in the wrong spot to not give the bike enough space. You know what I mean?
Right. It's uncomfortable for all road users.
Yeah.
And we don't treat cars that way. You know, just kind of like
stop the road.
Yeah. Right.
Just that's a good point.
Into a field, right? So I think just like it seems like we've kind of just dropped spaghetti on a map of bike lanes right now, and just connecting the dots there is really an opportunity here. Denver's doing it. You know, Aurora's got a new transportation master plan. They're really doubling down on multimodal. So even some of these like more suburban areas, I think are really interested in diversifying transportation options.
I think we do need to talk a little bit about the bike lane controversy though, because you kind of brought it up, right? A lot of times some of the louder voices are more advocating for parking, for instance, which tends to be something that goes when a bike lane goes in. But some folks, like I think about the business owners on Broadway that complained about the construction of the Broadway bike lane impacting their business, or they say, you know, I just don't see a lot of people using them. I just wonder, how do you think the governor should sell this bike lane project to communities that maybe don't initially see the benefit?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of new data out there that shows that cyclists actually are good for economic development, that they do frequent your stores. It's just that business owners aren't asking their customers how they arrived, and they're just kind of assuming that everyone drives.
Is driving.
Right. I also think some of this takes some time. I don't know if if they listen to your show, maybe they know about the Broadway bike lane, but if they don't, they may not know it exists. Word needs to get out. People need to see it, you know, especially in the summer when it's warm, people are out on bikes, they need to experience it and how good it feels. Broadway is an example where the road was so overbuilt. It was like 5 or 6 lanes one way. Right.
And I think about when UMS happens on Broadway, the Underground Music Showcase every year, and they shut down parts of it sometimes, but not all of it. And then you're a pedestrian crossing 5 lanes of traffic because you're paying to be at a festival where it's saying go ping pong across this street to go all to these different venues. And I think that's when folks really do start to think, oh, there doesn't need to be 5 lanes of traffic here.
Right. And it was really designed, Broadway and Lincoln combined were designed for through traffic, for commuting.
Absolutely.
From the southern metro Denver area up I-25 and up to the Capitol and to Lodo, right? Yeah. That's not good for community, right? If you want Broadway to be a place that people want to be, that people want to hang out
outside of
they want to
cars.
Shop there. Right. Then you got to build it so that it's comfortable and beautiful And, replacing car lanes and with bike lanes so that people don't have to be in a car is one way to do that. And beautifying it and adding art and all the things they're doing. I would just add too, I think, some of the development going in around Alameda Station, sort of on the south end of Broadway there, if we're thinking of Alameda and Broadway. That's thousands of new homes, thousands of new people coming into the neighborhood, which is great for the businesses on Broadway that have struggled to stay open. We've got empty storefronts there, or we should have a thriving main street.
Yeah.
And we just don't have really the population density to support those local businesses. So I'm excited about some of that transit-oriented development going in
100%.
around Alameda Station and then on I-25 and Broadway further south there.
And for folks to picture this, it used to be a giant sea of parking lots bordered by the Kmart, I think is the most notable store that was there. And there was it's like a round of strip malls, and there's other stores still there. But a lot of that is being replaced with housing, with high density apartment buildings. And I see what you're saying, though. Eventually, all those people are going to come. So we want them to be able to access the main street that Broadway really is. Mm-hmm. That's a great way to picture it. Okay. So we recently learned that Colorado Springs State Representative Steph Vigil lost her seat in a recount by 3 votes, which is hard to comprehend, but she was a huge champion of transit. And I wonder what your sense is of the political climate Polis is facing right now when it comes to these more progressive transit policies that will be needed to achieve these goals and need those legislators to usher them forward.
Yeah. You're going to make me cry about Representative Vigil, one of my favorite legislators. Yeah, we've worked together in the past for sure. I think a lot of the conversations have changed quite a bit just in the last few years of the legislature. If you think back to one of the transportation funding bills from 2021, $5 billion for state transportation funding, that was really a car-centric bill. We did not have enough money in there for transit, biking and walking, no money for RTD operations. It was sort of like the past thinking.
Right.
And we've really seen a bit of a paradigm shift since then, where legislators now are calling for more investment in safe bicycle and pedestrian facilities and more funding for transit. And just this last year, we passed the bill, Senate Bill 230, that created an oil and gas production fee to fund transit. So that's going to be $110 million a year for our transit system, including for RTD, to run those buses and trains more frequently, to build out the rail system, to build better first last mile connections so people can walk to the train station, rather than just like seeing it and not knowing how to get there because there's a, huge parking lot in front of it or whatever. So I've definitely seen a shift in just the way people are talking and thinking about transportation and the types of legislation we're seeing developed.
So even with not having someone like Steph, do you think that there's still enough appetite from legislators to continue pushing this forward?
Yeah, I will certainly miss Representative Vigil. I will still probably call her to get her thoughts on things. But we have other great legislators at the Capitol. Senator Faith Winter.
I was just going to say, she was at this press conference. She's always been an advocate.
Huge
bike
champion.
rider.
Yeah. For climate policy,
yeah,
for transit and transportation. She's excellent. And many others on the House side as well. I'm encouraged. I think we're in good shape. We've got a couple bills in the works here, thinking about RTD's transit system, thinking about state, regional, local transportation goals around mode shift, to follow up on the transportation vision. Like, how do you get cities to think about setting goals around transit, biking, and walking, and really shifting the funding toward those modes?
Sure. So we've kind of danced around this. We've talked about density, transit-oriented development, and stuff like that. And this is part of this transit plan, is the density piece. So the governor says he has this goal of ensuring 52% of new housing is built near transit lines. In other words, transit-oriented development, which historically Denver has not been great at. Where do you see the opportunities for more transit-oriented development in Denver today?
So first, what I'd say is, we have a housing crisis in Colorado. No secret there. The state is about 105,000 units short of a stable market. And we've built a lot of housing recently. A lot of housing is in the pipeline. It really was in 2021, 2022. It's kind of gone cold since then, as some of the capital has dried up in 2023 and 2024. So I'm a little bit worried about that. But we've got to start building a lot more housing and more consistently every year over the next decade to close that gap so that rents don't keep going up and housing costs don't go up anymore. And maybe they even come down for people so they can afford to live here. And open up more housing opportunities, more affordable housing opportunities for low-income families to stay in our state, for essential workers to live here, for your teachers and your nurses to actually live here. And I think there's plenty of opportunity to build that inside our urban areas. So if you think about back to RTD's Fast Tracks rail expansion from 2004, we built all these train stations. There's now, I think, over 80 of them. And a lot of them, we put them in kind of the worst places you could, far from people, businesses, neighborhoods. Half of them are like along the interstate highway. So like half of your transit area, potential transit area for housing is kind of off limits. And other times, so it's in a warehouse district or an open space. And so they surrounded a lot of those stations with just seas of parking, thousands of spaces. And part of it was just kind of a placeholder. Part of it was as kind of like to collect cars from those neighborhoods and get them on trains. But you don't need that at every stop, maybe at the end of the line.
Sure.
But I think one benefit of that is that it's much easier to develop an empty parking lot than a single family neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right. So we have these opportunities. You think the Southmore station,
South Denver. Yeah.
Thousands of parking spaces. RTD did an analysis last year. Only 20% of people of those parking spaces are used during peak periods. They're empty.
Yeah.
And that's a great opportunity.
And people want to live in that neighborhood.
Right.
You know?
Right next to the train.
Totally.
That's where we should be putting a lot of affordable housing, mixed use development so people have places to walk to, and connecting it all with that bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure.
Do you have like a dream intersection or like a section of the city that you pass all the time where you're like, this is where I would love to see 400 units of you know what I mean? Like I live right Alameda and Federal. I could see absolutely along South Federal and they're doing it. It's happening for sure. But is there like a spot where you're like, this is it. This could be the thing.
So many. Yeah. Like I said, I'm really excited about the Alameda station and the I-25 and Broadway developments. Those are going to be 7, 9, 12-story buildings, thousands of new units.
Right in the middle. I mean, it's in the middle of the action.
Right. You got trains right there, buses right there. You got the South Platte River, so opportunity there to really develop the riverfront. So we're actually like respecting our river rather than building a highway over it.
Yeah, or just dumping stuff in it,
right.
Historically.
Imagine that. Same with River Mile further north, right? A real opportunity there to build a new walkable neighborhood right on the riverfront, right in the middle of Denver. And if there's ever a place that people are going to, leave their cars at home, be living right there next to all these amenities, right?
Yeah.
So I think those are great opportunities in Denver. There's some cool stuff going on outside Denver too. Like Old Town Arvadas.
Oh, it's so cute.
It's great, right? Like if we could just build, 100 of those, like people would live right around there.
That's a good model. That's a good way to think about it.
And to Westminster's credit, they've built downtown Westminster around a planned future rail station that isn't there yet. But they've got good density there, lots of affordable housing, coffee shops and restaurants. It's off the US 36, but in the future, hopefully they have train service there and you could hop on and be downtown within 3 stops.
I love that. I love thinking about it. I like to give people pictures of like what this could be. And there are some already ones in process.
Yeah. I think one other one that comes to mind that exists.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a ton of those, but Belmar and Lakewood.
Oh, yeah.
Tons of vision, right? It was an old...
It was a mall.
It was a mall, right? It was underutilized.
And I will give respect to other folks like me that loved Villa Italia, but the iteration now is a much different version.
Right. So they replaced it with a mixed-use neighborhood. They've got some townhomes there, some multifamily housing, 3, 4, 5 stories, a grocery store on site, all these restaurants.
Fitness studios, a Target,
right. It's got everything right on a bus line across from Belmar Park. I mean, it's a highly desirable place to live, and they've been crushing it.
I'm there every week, honestly.
Yeah, right.
I love that part of town. Well, Matt Fromer, thank you so much. This was really lovely.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell Governor Polis about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you later.